Okay. Not my fault this time. Not my fault. My computer decided to die, and I had to buy a whole new computer because all the insides decided that they wanted to just fry. Ugh. That was a pain. An expensive pain. So, yeah, not my fault this time. Also, I saw a comment that said I should probably just do this every month or once a month. Um, so that I still have enough time to spend doing everything else, my job, schoolwork, hang with my girl, and actually still do this. So I'm probably going to do that. Just like expect at least once a month. Once a month is my definite yes. It's just going to happen. Twice a month if I'm lucky and get some time, some downtime. So yeah, thank you for your patience. Let's get into this. Chapter 15. Happy birthday to me. It was now Thursday of the second week of the second semester at Beacon Academy. It had been 3 days since Demon had beaten Pyrrha, and the girls had beaten him to a pulp. Vanessa had been hard at work tinkering with everything and created a massive supply of everything, stopping only because there simply wasn't enough space. As Demon woke up in the morning, he groaned as he saw what day it was, and it was the day of his nightmares, the day that he dreaded to come around every year. It was his birthday. He drudged through the day, luckily managing to not see any of Team RWBY or Juniper, so they could break his bones again, and went back to his room after classes. He went over and activated Sid, hearing the servos in his body whine as he activated after much neglecting. Demon poured some oil on his joints before setting him to his task. Sid, complete this homework, and maybe in A standard. That'll at least look respectable, he ordered, setting the ridiculous pile of homework in front of the Spectre, the bot immediately getting to work. Hey, that's cheating, complained Rosalina. A sour look crossed her face. Wow, you guys really like saying that. Anyways, yes, it's cheating, but it can also be yours for the small price of a closed mouth. Rosaline got the general idea and dumped the paper in front of the Spectre as well, making the sign of zipping your lips afterwards. Kira just grumbled and set the papers in front of the robot as well, a solid meter-high pile of books sitting there. Demon waited until the other two had been distracted before cloaking and heading out of the room. He went down to his pod and walked inside. Vanessa had put all the specters back in their usual positions and was now meandering about, casually practicing with her oversized scythe. He ducked to narrowly avoid a horizontal slash and threw a bullet at Vanessa to get her attention. Sir, you're back. Really? I would have never known. She punched him on the shoulder softly, still managing to somehow bruise him. Yeah, I know I'm an ass. I need you to watch over my stuff tonight. I'm going out. Ooh, where are you going? I'm going somewhere. Right next to nowhere. About a mile from none of your business. She crossed her colossal arms, trying to psych out Demon, and failing miserably. She agreed and left Demon to do whatever he was going to do. He grabbed his motorbike and a couple of the devices Vanessa had built, and made his way to Vale. Glad to be away from the stresses of school, he had managed to procure a few hundred lien from playing poker games with Yang. She just didn't know when to quit. He rode around town for a while before finally arriving at the place he was looking for, apparel and armor. He walked in and heard a small bell ding, causing the man at the counter to look up. Ah, if it isn't the young lad who wanted that fancy armor of his. Yep, so, I got everything you need to complete it, I told Ivan, handing over the larger rucksack full of devices. Why, thank you, young man. I shall see you in half an hour. Yeah, I guess I'll see to it and get you the Titan delivered as soon as possible. Accepted, Demon, and beginning to walk out of the door as he did, Ivan raised one eyebrow at this and called up to Demon. Sir, you paid for the armor this morning. Demon stopped and turned around to him at this. When did that happen? Remember, you transferred the money to my account this morning as well as 5% extra, chirped the man, definitely happy with the extra cash. Demon shook his head for a bit. Must have had a memory lapse, thought Demon, coming up with the only logical reason for his forgetfulness. He waved goodbye to Ivan and walked to the next store on his list, the cake shop. As he arrived, he saw something that shocked him. They were completely sold out. When he said completely, he meant completely. They literally had nothing that could have been eaten left. Every cake on display in storage, every cookie, bun, or sweetbread was gone, as well as every drink they had as well. Who bought everything? Questioned Demon, walking up to the person at the front of the desk, who was a bit scared at his appearance. Someone walked in here this morning and bought everything. Sorry, we won't be getting a new stock until tomorrow. Great, just great. He waved goodbye to the shopkeeper and moved on to the next shop, and the next one, and the next one after that. He literally spent an hour scouring every single damn cake store in the entire city before giving up. He drove up to a nearby store. They were out of cakes as well, and literally everything birthday related. There was nothing that he could use for his own birthday that was meant for a birthday. After it turned dark, he decided to screw it all and drove to a local cafe. He ordered a small iced muffin and a coffee before sitting down in a seat outside. He waited for a minute before they were brought to him. He paid for it, then looked at what was going to be the most depressing birthday he'd ever had, other than the one where his mother died. Vanished. He had a muffin, no candle, a coffee, and that was it. Wait a second. He pulled a cigar out of his pocket, just so happened to have one. He lit it and put it on top of the muffin. Perfect, now I have a candle. Before he could indulge in his birthday kick, he heard the all too familiar voices coming down the street. He ignored them to the best he could, but failed the second he felt someone tap on his back. What you doing? He questioned RWBY, Demon not even bothering to turn. Trying to enjoy peace and quiet. Really? RWBY probed, trying to get an answer out of him. Demon still refusing to turn around. By this time, he heard the rest of the group turn up. What are you doing, Demon? Questioned Rosaline. Yeah, and once you're done telling us, we can break your legs, said Nora. And what's this about breaking legs? It was Yang this time, a bit of hope in her voice. Guys, I think we should leave him alone, spoke Pyrrha, yet again becoming the voice of reason. Just tell us, Demon, pleaded RWBY. I'm trying to enjoy my bloody birthday, so please leave. They all stopped where they were standing, trying to comprehend the gravity of the situation. He was sitting by himself, with a muffin, a cigar for a candle, and no one with him. Dude, that's depressing, commented John. Really? Replied Demon, lacing the words with the most sarcasm humanly possible. Why the shitfest? Asked Yang. Well, I went to literally every damn place in this entire godforsaken city, and there was not a damn place that wasn't sold out of birthday supplies. He didn't get a response for a while, but heard hushed whispers and sounds of people moving off. Well, you could tell us next time. Maybe you could tell us, I don't know, next time and we could throw you a party? Said RWBY, a hint of guilt in her voice. I never have parties with people, replied Demon, dipping his head a bit. Why? Asked RWBY, genuine interest seeping into her voice. The day of my birthday was the day that I lost my mother. He didn't get a response from RWBY, but she hugged him tightly before running off to catch up with the others who had walked off. Demon just sighed and ate his muffin in a single bite. The smell of the cigar filled his nostrils as he had his faceplate off. He tipped the waiter generously before taking his coffee and walking back to apparel and armor. Ivan was in the process of shutting down the store for the night as Demon walked in, causing the man to look up from locking the cash register. "Ah, I thought you'd never come back. I have it right here," quickly remarked Ivan, rushing out the back of the store as he did. A minute later he came out wielding a massive suit of armor and bulletproof glass. Considering that the suit's armor was made up of an alloy that could put the Atlas Paladin's armor to shame, it's the best you're going to find anywhere. And if your enhancements work, then you could rival the best huntsmen and huntresses. Added a few personal touches, such as infusing dust into certain parts of the armor as well, making sure that you can run your aura through the armor to surround it. Demon stared at the armor beneath the case. It was perfect. It was beyond what he could have imagined. As soon as he'd seen his mother and her red and black plating, he knew this would remind him of her. Two massive, blood-red gauntlets were cut of Damascus steel, both being much bigger than his hands. The reason of being copious amounts of strength-enhancing servos beneath the plating. They covered his fingers in red claws, resembling those of the dragons from Old Earth's tales. They were also fitted with micro-magnets, allowing for wall running. On his right gauntlet was a grapple launcher, and on the left, a shuriken launcher. A massive rectangular pauldron was sitting on his left shoulder, and a smaller, round pauldron was resting on the right shoulder, both being a blood-red taint and plated. Plated boots and greaves were resting on the legs, being slightly thicker to accommodate the strength servos as well. The rest of the armor resembled his normal pilot gear, except for two plated lengths of steel that covered the sides of the upper legs and thick chest plate. Underneath the thicker plating was special cloth-like fabric that was made of a blend between titanium thread and Kevlar. The back of his gear extended out a bit to accommodate for a small battery pack between his shoulder blades. The battery was to power the gear, and was even set to be charged by the kinetic energy he made while fighting, essentially making it an unlimited energy. A prototype shield generator was stored running along his spine and could project a shield much similar to that of a Titan, except human size. He mumbled something incoherent as Ivan unlocked the case, still a bit dazed by the armor's beauty. When he was finished, he stood back, allowing Demon to admire his work. Demon stepped forward and felt the armor plating. It was as light as if he was holding air. He disconnected the front of the chest plate, and he could easily carry it with 2 fingers. He set it on the floor and tested the armor by firing a few rounds into it. The bullets reflected off of it, doing nothing more than cleaning a bit of the dust off the plating. He smiled and shook the armor in his hand again. He packed it into a duffel bag, surprisingly actually fit, and wrote to Beacon. Ruby's point of view. Shit. She didn't ever swear. Ever. But this was all she could think when she heard why Demon was alone. She was kinda the reason why every store was out of birthday supplies. It was Yang's birthday, and she had insisted that they buy out every store in the city to make the best birthday ever. But she never realized it would hurt Demon so much, and they didn't even invite him. She had quickly ushered everyone away from him as he said it, thanking God that he didn't turn around and see them because they all wore party gear. They had regrouped a block away and contemplated what they should do. Everyone felt very guilty that they had accidentally destroyed Demon's birthday. After deciding that they should probably comfort him, they decided to travel back and try and cheer him up, only to find that he wasn't there anymore. They all tried to find out where he was on a scroll, finding that he disabled it. After about 10 minutes of searching, they headed back to Beacon. After all, they still had Yang's party to attend. Demon's point of view. He had arrived back at Beacon, slightly annoyed that his cake was crap, and headed to the pod. As he was walking through the courtyard, he glanced over at Team RWBY's dorm and saw the lights strobing, a party obviously taking place. Of course it was them. Couldn't happen to anyone else, could it? He shook his head a bit as he carried the duffel bag with his armor in it across the campus, relieved when he finally reached his pod. He opened the door and was a bit shocked when he found the lights turned off. He tried to turn them on remotely by pressing a multitude of buttons on his wrist screen to illuminate the pod. Frustrated, he turned the small light on the side of his helmet, dropped the duffel bag, and went over to the fuse box on the opposite wall. He kicked a couple of the spare guns that were strewn around the pod on his way to the fuse box. The small light on his helmet was not really doing much to show anything in the dark. He eventually found his way there and pulled the fuse box, as he checked the wires and found nothing was wrong, until he saw the power switch and found it had been flicked off. He grumbled a bit as he flicked the switch and turned the overhead lights back on. As he closed the fuse box, he felt something was watching him. So obviously, he pulled out his wingman and spun around to face the threat, to be met with the sight of his mother. I'm sensing that pointing a gun at me is some form of greeting, she deadpanned, setting her hands on her hips. Demon immediately dropped the pistol and sprinted forward, embracing his mother in a warm hug. He stayed like that for a while, until he finally pulled back, tears already steadily flowing down his cheeks inside his armor. You didn't think I would forget your birthday, did you? I mean, knowing Raven, she definitely would have, extremely so. She's a bitch. Mother of the Year. He responded by hugging her again. The emotions of missing his mother for so many years was welling up. They stayed like that for another minute before Demon finally composed himself. He stepped back and pulled off his helmet to let his mother see his face. His long, black hair cascaded down his back. He looked very similar to that of his mother's, and he blinked a few times to adjust his eyes to the light. She smiled, but looked a bit worried when she saw his red eyes. As a response to this, she reached up and pulled off her own helmet, confirming even further that this was his mother. It was the exact face he'd grown up to, and the one he missed for so many years. So, my little hawk, how have you been? She asked, the words coming out a bit choked, as she was already beginning to tear up. I joined the militia after you. I was the top pilot, and that's about what my life's been like. Did you finish school? She probed, worrying that he had just skipped school and went straight to the army. Yeah, I graduated a bit early and managed to finish an engineering degree before I was old enough for the militia. She smiled and hugged him, glad to hear that he went well without her. They went and sat down on a couch in the middle of the room. Demon told her the whole story of how he had developed red eyes, how he had risen to become the top pilot, and how he managed to find his way to Remnant. She listened intently the whole time, enraptured in his story. After he finished, she quickly began telling him about how he managed to get to Remnant. She had been at their house with his uncle when they heard an emergency siren. They quickly packed up their stuff and headed to their city center, where the evacuation ships were picking up the town folk. They had held there for a while before finally saw what was causing the commotion. A couple of streets down was about 100 IMC Spectres. They were killing people left, right, and center. Most of the other people were panicking. They began running for the evacuation area, believing it would become a killing ground in the next minute. His mother and uncle stayed there and made it onto a dropship just before the Spectres had reached where they were. The craft had lifted off, but before they could fly off, the pilot was shot dead. His uncle had to grab the controls and take over, knowing how to fly after being a dropship pilot in the Titan Wars. They were just about to warp away from the colony when they saw a giant missile being fired from an IMC carrier that was overhead. They had hastily warped at the last second and ended up on Remnant instead of the nearest colony. After that, the rest of the people on the ship were killed by Grimm after the crash. The only reason his mother and uncle survived was because of their military training. They were taken in by a kind man named Tai Yang and eventually integrated into society. After 2 years, they both managed to unlock their auras and receive training from Tai Yang, allowing them to be accepted into Beacon Academy as final year students. They graduated and were inducted as proper huntsmen and huntresses. After a while, she was brought under employment by an anonymous benefactor that claimed she was needed to save Remnant. After working for them for a while, she was forced to drift away from her family and relatives, admitting that she had barely spoken to his uncle in months. Demon took this all in, learning about how his mother had arrived in Remnant. Now, on to the reason why I'm here, began Raven, standing up as she did. Happy 19th birthday, she chimed and hugged him once more. She stepped back and pulled out her sword, slashing it into the air, creating a large red portal where she cut. Demon was a bit taken aback at this, eyes going wide in shock. Semblance, she explained, reaching into the portal and pulling out 2 things. The first was a long case, one that looked like what people would store guns in. The other was almost spherical shape. She first handed over the spherical object, it being wrapped in a silver wrapping paper. He carefully took it and felt that it didn't really weigh much. So he tore off the paper and was stopped by what he saw, an almost exact copy of his mother's helmet, although it was shaped to his head. The back of the mask was a bit more flared than hers, but it was almost exactly the same, even being open at the back to allow his hair to flow out. He flipped it over and put it on, amazed at how perfectly it fit. As he looked around, he was almost surprised to see the same HUD that he installed in his own helmet was operational in this one, even putting a large bar at the top of his vision, probably for aura. He pulled it off and hugged his mother again. I assume it was you who paid for the armor then? She smiled a bit before nodding again, then turned around and grabbed the case behind her, straining a bit as she picked it up. When Demon grabbed it, he hastily popped off the locks and opened the case, almost crying at what he saw. Inside was a weapon that looked exceedingly similar to his mother's weapon. He reached down and pulled the Odachi out of the sheath, being greeted by one that looked almost the same as hers. Its red blade was slightly thicker, and there was a knuckle guard that was positioned in front of the handle. He was a bit disappointed that it was about the length of a katana, until he did a practice swing and it doubled in length. It was perfectly balanced, so he could use it with 1 or 2 hands, the hilt being long enough to accommodate both. After he practiced with it for a few seconds, he flicked it in a certain way and the blade retracted, allowing him to put it back inside the sheath. And as he did, he noticed something strange. About halfway along the hilt was a pin, indicating that it could fold upward with a grip for something. A trigger also being located at the bottom of the hilt. Seeing that Demon was confused, Raven walked over and took the sheath and blade from him. She stood back a few steps before twisting the knuckle guard so that it was perpendicular. As she did, the hilt shifted so that it folded, facing inwards, and the end of the sheath split in half. As it did, the two sides moved back along the sheath, revealing a barrel for a gun. And then, when it was finished shifting, it resembled something akin to a handheld chain gun. He nearly cried at how well suited it was to him. The gun was effectively being a HMG. Raven was struggling a bit to hold it up, so Dean walked over and took the gun, feeling the hefty weight of the HMG. He tried it a bit before he was given a massive bullet chain by Raven. He loaded it through the port on the side of the gun, turned it to the side wall, and began firing. The recoil from the gun was insane, and he went off target a couple times, regretting doing so as the 50 cal bullets punched holes through the sides of the pod. He smiled again and put the safety on the weapon. "Thank you so much," he squealed, running over and hugging her again. "Don't start celebrating just yet. You haven't even gotten to your last gift." He was dying from anticipation, as what could be even more awesome than his two presents. He took a step forward before placing her hand on his shoulder and began speaking in a serious tone. "For it is in passing that we achieve immortality. Through this we become a paragon of virtue and glory, to rise above all, infinite in distance and unbound by death. I release your soul, and by my shoulder protect thee." When she finished, a dark black aura surrounded Demon, flaking off into an unseen wind as small particles. "Did you unlock your aura?" "Yes. I couldn't just sit by and watch you get beaten to a pulp by a bunch of teenage girls, could I?" He looked down a bit, which made his mother smirk a bit. "Now, unfortunately for us both, I must go now." Demon didn't really enjoy big goodbyes, so he just hugged her one final time, finding that it was a lot stranger having his aura unlocked, nearly choking her from the hug. She smiled before putting her mask on and stepping into the middle of the room, opening another portal with her Adachi. Just before she stepped into the portal, she paused for a second to turn back to Demon. "Just a side note, you have a sister." "Say what?" "Yeah, I kinda married Tai Yang and had a child with him." "So you have a sister, and another half-sister." "And you didn't mention this earlier?" "Yeah, I figured you would have worked it out by now. Anyway, I'm sure you'll figure out soon enough," she stated before finally going through the portal. Demon stood there for a second, contemplating what had happened in the short time his mother was here. "I have a sister? How am I meant to know who it is?" Demon was seriously wondering what was going to... "I have a sister. How the hell am I meant to know who it is?" Demon was seriously wondering how he was going to find his sister. And that's when the sleep deprivation set in. He looked over at the clock and found it was already past midnight. Meh, I'll search for it tomorrow. And with that, he collapsed on the couch, falling into a blissful sleep, happy that his birthday had turned out better than expected.